All right. We are live, everyone. It is Monday. That means Conversations on Vitality with Ariel and James here again. Woohoo! All right. As you may be tuning in for the first time, this is our weekly chat. Ariel and I get together to talk all things health, wellness, spirituality, energetics, all of that to help you live your most authentic and healthiest version of you that is out there, that is possible. And obviously, there's a lot of information. There's a lot of education that comes each and every week. For those of you that may be new, on the Facebook page or the YouTube channel for Vitality Wellness, all the previous sessions are there, obviously titled with its appropriate subject matter and some really great stuff. Ariel and I have been doing this now for a year, basically
Yeah.
a year, yeah, and showing up and sharing. So, Ariel, I know we're going to drive right in. We're going to talk cortisol today. I know a lot of people are familiar with the term. There's a lot of things, pros and cons with cortisol, its effect on the body, its negating effect on our wellness, and both physically and mentally, which we can talk about as well. Why don't we take us? Why don't you start off with just maybe opening up a discussion on what it is,
Mhm.
and please.
So cortisol is not bad, but it's when it
Mm.
becomes dysregulated that it's bad. Cortisol is a hormone that our body makes. You have your central nervous system, okay? So your brain is connected with a nervous system all the way down to your spine, and then connected to all your organ systems like little wires, right? So you've got your computer, you've got all the cables, and every cable connects to a different organ system. You have 11 body systems that it connects to. And then what happens is within those body systems, you need to maintain homeostasis so that you have a normal response. In that central nervous system, you have something called the parasympathetic state and the sympathetic nervous system. So that's your fight or flight or your rest and digest. And so when we are naturally waking up first thing in the morning, our cortisol is high for 1 hour. And so we want to maximize that. It's already high, and then throughout the day, it slowly starts to taper off. And the purpose of that is to get us out of bed and get us out of that unconscious state. Otherwise, if we didn't have that boost of cortisol, it would be really hard to get out of bed, and it would take hours. So being able to get out of bed within 15 to 20 minutes, you can thank your cortisol for that. But unfortunately, cortisol can become dysregulated where some people, their cortisol doesn't get activated until they go to bed. That can be a problem. Or they have multiple cortisol spikes in the day. If you have more than one cortisol spike, then over a long period of time, as you get older, as your digestion slows down, what happens is you can go into more of a fat storage mode, and we notice it in our midsection. Okay, so if you're eating healthy, you know you are eating in a calorie deficit, and you are working out and trying to keep your stress low, but you're noticing that you're getting this little bit of a pooch. For women, it could be your estrogen levels have dropped through perimenopause or menopause, so we need to indicate support there. Or B, for men, it's your cortisol. Taking a look at your cortisol. How are you managing your work stress? How are you managing your gut health? Are you bloated all the time? Are you eating a little bit imbalanced towards your gut bugs? Are you getting your sleep? Are you working out in the morning, or are you working out right before bed? These little things are really important because your central nervous system is connected through the vagus nerve to the gut, and it sends these little signals back and forth, thousands of signals a day, to make sure that, okay, guys, we're good. Everyone's communicating. Cortisol is good. All right. And it's sending these signals, thousands of signals every single day. It also does it in the back. So in the back, the back of your brain is sending signals to your adrenals, which are these little glands that sit on top of your kidneys and your lower back. So there's a huge importance here when it comes to supporting these. If you are someone that is suffering from PTSD or low grade to high grade chronic stress or trauma, that can send out hormones from the adrenals multiple times a day, creating cortisol dysregulation. And what happens is it actually pushes, the pancreas then will push more sugar, glucose, into the blood that now the insulin has to try to regulate, creating insulin dysregulation. And now it's like, it's almost as if your body just ate a bunch of chocolate bars, but you didn't. Maybe you just did some cardio. You're fasting. But your stress response is so high that it's pushing all this stored glycogen, breaking it down into glucose, pushing it into the blood through the pancreas. And now you're getting thick, mucky blood because your body thinks it's in the fight or flight. It thinks it's about to run from a bear. So we notice this from emotional trauma, but also abusing stimulants. So abusing caffeine. Caffeine should only be consumed once in the morning if you are a coffee drinker, because if you're drinking coffee later in the day, your cortisol levels are tapering off. So if all of a sudden you drink a coffee, you're boosting your cortisol back up, and you're going to go into a fat storage mode because it's not natural to your homeostasis level.
I want to get back to your spikes. You talked about, in a perfect world, cortisol is elevated in the morning for 1 hour. And I think in one of our conversations, you had mentioned that's related to sun. When the sun rises or something, I think, right? It's like our natural time to get up and tend to the fields and do our things that we used to do all these millennia ago. Okay. You said something really interesting, though, that some people will either have spikes throughout the day and or possibly elevated at night at bedtime, which would be the opposite. So without testing, what can a layperson look for that might indicate what those spikes mean? Like, what would it be? What would I experience if I was going through those?
You might notice shortness of breath, anxiety, panic attacks. Sometimes your bottom lip will quiver. Sometimes your hands will tremble when you're like trying to write with a pen, or you're just resting and you notice your hands kind of have a bit of a shake. You'll notice that some people will have IBS or constipation or diarrhea because you have a whole central nervous system in your gut. And so if your adrenals are being taxed, your gut feels it. You will also notice sometimes heart palpitations, fatigue, chronic fatigue, right? So this depends on how chronic you have let the cortisol dysregulation take on. If cortisol dysregulation is new for you, then you'll be able to work through it a lot easier. But this has been something that's been going on for 10 years or more, which is most people, because that's when you start to really notice, because the quality of life is going down. Then it is a good idea to start implementing supportive botanical herbs to regulate your cortisol, so adaptogens.
Which we'll get into solutions in a moment. We talked adrenals as well. So I'm another term that we hear a lot, especially with athletics and performance as well, is adrenal fatigue. Yes. It's something that's quite common. Now, is that, because you mentioned there's a correlation between cortisol and adrenals. So is there a cart before the horse? Is chicken and egg? How does that work with that relationship dynamic between the two body parts?
So as soon as your brain realizes that I have to push a lot of energy output, therefore maybe you don't have the calories to support it, or maybe you've been training for some sort of like fitness, goal. Maybe you're an athlete, a soccer player, or a basketball player, something like that, or maybe you're a marathon runner, right? A swimmer. So usually it's more of the long distance cardio, right? Where you have to do the quick cardio sprints, or you have to do the long cardio duration, where it's really hard on your adrenals. If you're doing it all the time, right? You're overtraining them. When you overtrain them, then you're over pushing your cortisol and adrenaline every day to give you that edge, to give you that push. And so food alone will not, eating your macros, your proteins, your fats, your carbs. If you're pushing like that 4 or 5 hours in the gym every day, you will suffer from, taxation on those adrenals. And eventually you will hit a wall. And people call it burnout. And it's because your adrenals are firing at 100% every day, but they run on fuel. And eventually that fuel source is gone. And being able to regulate that cortisol, because what happens with your adrenals is if you're training it to produce so much adrenaline and so much cortisol every single day, and then all of a sudden you take a break and you go off for 2 weeks and you take a vacation, they're still firing. They don't know that they're taking a day off. They don't understand days off, right?
I think it's also important to say that adrenal fatigue can also happen in the arena of life. It's like, so it's not just about going performance training. It's also dealing with life and the stressors and everything that happens in our day-to-day, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Not just emotional, but also your body composition. You can develop adrenal fatigue literally just by being overweight. Right? Because now your cells have excess toxins and excess mass that is putting stress on the joints that you have to carry around. Maybe you have an extra 50 to 100 pounds or more that you really shouldn't. You have to sleep with that. You have to walk around. You have to go up the stairs. You have to do whatever you do with that extra weight. And that stresses your cortisol. That stresses your adrenals, right?
Yeah.
So it can even be that.
We just got a question that came in on our board here. I'll read it to you. What kind of test can we ask from our GP to know if we have adrenal fatigue?
So because I'm not a medical physician, I'm more Eastern medicine. We have testing here, bioenergetic testing that can test the state where your adrenals and your cortisol is at. But when it comes to getting those tests done by your GP, chances of them running tests for you are very slim because you have to have a very good reason. They won't just let you get testing done. But if you go to like a local naturopath, you'll be able to get a stress test done. And then you can see the spectrum and the range of where your cortisol and your adrenals and all that are at, and how close you are to getting adrenal fatigue. And remember, adrenal fatigue is not something to be afraid of. It's just, you have to be proactive. So you have to reset your adrenals through support.
Right. Okay. One more thing before we go solution-based conversation is tummy fat. So it seems that cortisol is everyone's nemesis when it comes to stored fat in the gut. I have a silly question maybe, but I'm curious. Why is it always in the gut?
So naturally,
yeah.
So the reason why, and so the reason why actually is it goes back to two things. Number one is your body doesn't know that you're just running late for work. It thinks you're running from a bear. So what happens when you're in the fight or flight, your stomach, the enzymes shut off. So now any food that you consume doesn't get digested. It gets stored as fat because you don't have the enzymes. The pancreas shuts off. Your eyes dilate so that you can have better vision. Your blood thickens because glucose goes into the blood to thicken the blood in case you got an injury from the woods, the forest, right? Back when we were living in those days. Mm-hmm. And so what happens is when you're doing this chronically, we eat every day, right? So if you're doing this chronically, then what happens is the food you're consuming, your body is storing it as fat. And where does it store it? It stores it in the belly fat, because you need to be able to have the ability to run away. So if your body stores it in the legs, that wouldn't be a very good adaptive response. And if it stores it in the arms, well, you need that to fight and protect yourself, right? But the belly is actually there to insulate the organs and protect the organs, so that, because these are vital organs, it's to protect you from Mother Nature because it thinks that you're trying to run away from a bear, right? And so if you were to get an injury, right, you wouldn't just bleed out. Your blood is so thick and mucky and coagulated. And it doesn't care if you have digestive issues. You survived. So it's just a survival tactic that your body does. And so we're only supposed to go through the fight or flight for about an hour a day. Anything after that, it does affect your body composition if you don't support the adrenals over time.
Wow. All right. That was really interesting, actually.
Yeah. So just to put this into perspective, bodybuilders that have to get under 10% body fat, they get the lean, shredded muscles, they are not on the treadmill running, right? Because that will spike their cortisol and make them gain belly fat. They don't run. They do slow and steady, and they keep their heart rate at a certain BP. And they'll do walking on the treadmill for hours, or they'll do the Stairmaster, but they go really low and really slow and steady to keep your cortisol low, right? Because they need to get, that belly fat gone.
Yeah.
And then people that are doing constant bodybuilding competitions and they want that edge and they don't want to burn out because it's their passion, they'll introduce adaptogens, ashwagandha, things like that, because they know it reduces their cortisol so that they can keep doing the things they love without creating harm.
Great. Solutions. So adaptogens. There we go. Ashwagandha. Great for stress and calming. So take us through some protocol that people can turn to either minimize cortisol, perhaps boost their adrenals, get everything working in balance optimally.
Number one is the biggest hormone to fight cortisol is the yin and the yang. You have oxytocin. So that's why they call it puppy therapy. Making sure that you spend about 10 to 15 minutes a day with an animal will regulate your cortisol for the whole day. Being with your children, having a 12-second hug, being intimate with your partner, listening to music that releases certain frequencies that calm you. They don't get you all jacked up and hyped up. Making sure that you're getting enough sleep. So 7 to 9 hours, slow and steady, 7 to 9 hours reduces your cortisol levels. Making sure you're doing your cardio when your cortisol is already high, which is within 3 hours of waking up. And trying to, if you're going to do cardio later on in the day, make sure that you're keeping your heart rate low for that kind of cardio. So your crazy cardio can be in the morning because your cortisol is already naturally up. But anything else after that, try to minimize that. And blood sugar, maintaining healthy blood sugar and maintaining healthy macros, making sure you're not overeating or undereating. You're not underhydrating, so making sure you're getting enough hydration. Your body is like a little toddler. If you starve it, it will get mad. If you overeat it, it will have a tummy ache, right? All of these things will affect your cortisol. If you deprive it of sleep, it will have a temper tantrum, So think of your body as a toddler, right? You want to keep the toddler happy, right? So you want to keep the cortisol happy. And then obviously, if you are a high performance person, throwing in some adaptogens goes a long way.
And obviously gut health too, because gut health weakens with the increase in cortisol, right?
It breaks down the endothelial cells that line the intestinal wall, and it can create leaky gut, IBS, colitis, Crohn's, diverticulitis. So if you already have that runs in the family, take a look at your stress levels, manage your stress properly, and don't forget to breathe. A lot of people do shallow breathing when they start to get really stressed. Take 5 minutes, go to a private room, sit down, and do some big expanding breaths. And that instantly, within 25 to 35 seconds, brings your cortisol right down to the parasympathetic state.
Nice. Love that. Great. Okay. So cortisol, I think a couple of takeaways that I have is cortisol is necessarily not a bad thing. We just need to keep it in check. And it actually does serve some beneficial purposes for our body, as well as mentally as well, right? So I think that's important for people out there, Ariel. We want to be mindful of, do we have midday spikes? Do we have spikes throughout the day? Of course, awareness is the first key to anything, right? And so being aware, does your cortisol spike at nighttime? Is it hard for them to go to bed? Is it hard for them to shut off? And so it's really linked to the fight and flight mechanism in our brain, right?
Yes.
And it coincides with the adrenals, and adrenals can be taxed for average Joe and Jane people out there, not just athletes. It's something that we all have to be mindful of. The two go hand in hand, and ultimately that there are solutions out there. There's dietary solutions, nutrition, of course. There's adaptogens. And again, for anybody, I think, Ariel, it was maybe 3 weeks ago, we did adaptogens, top 6 adaptogens. look that episode up, because it's the big six that can be a game changer for people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. And most importantly, for people that want to investigate more, maybe have a conversation with you, again, this is the realm of what Vitality Wellness World does. You have tests that can get in and measure cortisol, measure adrenal support or function, all of that, correct?
Yes, and we can see where you are on the spectrum, and we can see, if there is any kind of customized approach. And remember, some people, they don't want to take supplements. We have other things that we can do, more lifestyle, right? So we find that missing piece that's perfect for you, and we do a needs-based analysis so that you're getting exactly what you want. And there's so many options. So don't feel like you have to always purchase something, right? There's lifestyle tricks too.
Absolutely. I think that's an important thing. Lifestyle and mindset tricks out there, hacks that will get you going in the right direction for sure.
Yes.
So. Awesome, Ariel. Well, great conversation today on cortisol, that pesky little thing that seems to rear its head for all of us at some point, for sure. Awesome. Any last thoughts before we wrap it up?
No.
Awesome.
I think we kind of covered everything. So
all right.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much. We'll see you all, our community. We'll see you next week, and enjoy the sun wherever you are. Cheers.